All right, so we're going to be using the story of X. And so this video is really about trying to identify what's happening to the variable X. So we're going to use PEMDAS as a way to help us gauge what's happening to the letter X. So find your letter X, see that your letter X is inside these parentheses. So that means parentheses are going to be first. And then what is the operation that is happening inside? And subtracting 4. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this other number right here is being multiplied because there's parentheses right here. So we have parentheses and we have multiplication. So the parentheses happen first, and then we are multiplying by -5, okay? So now let's go do number 2. So think about it as there's two numbers. So there's going to be two operations. So this one right now is multiplication. And this one right here is adding 5. Which happens first? Well, multiplication happens before addition. So first we're multiplying by 2, and then we add 5. And so that's what needed to go here, okay? Now let's take a look at number 3. So what's happening to X? Well, there is division because there's this line. And so we are dividing by 5. So the first thing that happens is we are dividing by 5. And the second thing that happens is that we are subtracting 18. Number 4 is a little different because we have this, again, a fraction. It's a little different than number 3 because number 3, the X was the only thing that was on top. Now I've got X minus 6 on top, and then it's divided by -4. So the first thing that happens is that we are subtracting 6 to the X, and then we are dividing by -4. All right, let's take a look at 5. So we've got parentheses. So our brain needs to go here. And then what is the operation inside there? Well, it's subtracting 4. And then this 4 on the outside means multiplication. So this 4 on the outside comes next. So it's multiplying by 4. Then we divide by 2. And then last we add 15. So let's take a look at 6. We've got our parentheses, and inside our parentheses, this 4x means we're multiplying, and then we're subtracting. And again, multiplication comes before subtraction. Now, even though we're dividing, we have to do the entire top first, then divide by 3. So we've got multiply by 4. We're going to subtract 7. We're going to divide by 3. Then we're going to multiply by 2. And at the very end, we add 6. Okay? So remember, however many numbers there are, that's how many operations you're going to have. So let's take a look. Here's 1 number, 2 numbers, 3 numbers, 4 numbers. So that means we're going to have 4 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to focus on parentheses. What's happening to the X? Well, we are subtracting 8. Okay? No exponents. Is there multiplication? Yes, because it's touching the parentheses. So we're going to multiply by -5. After we do that, we got to finish doing the top because this whole thing is being divided by 3. So we got to finish the top first. So we subtracted 8, multiply by -5, then we add 11. Then we divide by 3. All right, now let's count how many numbers there are. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means there's going to be 4 items in our list. So what's happening to X first? Well, it's being divided by 8. Then we add 5. Then we're multiplying by 9. And then at the end, we add 4. Okay, so that's what the story of X is, right? And that was based off of PEMDAS. Now I want you to just reverse the story. So this is my analogy of us taking off the tire. So step 1 was, in this particular problem, if you remember back on number 1, the first thing we did was subtract 4, then we multiplied by -5. So now it's time for us to reverse the story. When I take off a tire, I go in a specific order, but when I take the tire and put it back on, I have to go in reverse order. So that's what we've got to do. We're reversing the order. So now I'm going to multiply by -5 because that's all I'm asked to do, and then subtract 4. So I'm just asking you to reverse the order of each of these stories. So this is just copying down and reversing the order. So then this is going to be first, then second, then third, then fourth. Okay. Right. So you can see how I'm reversing that order. Okay. So the story was 1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to reverse the order. Add 6, multiply by 2, divide by 3, subtract 7. And again, you're just copying this down. Okay. So that's the reverse order. Now you're going to do the inverse. So how do you undo? So the inverse is going to be undo. So how do you undo multiplication? Well, that's going to be division, and the number stays the same. So this is going to be your to-do list when you go and solve. So how do you undo subtracting by 4? You're going to add by 4. So for example, now this is my to-do list. The inverse says that I am going to divide by -5. Now I'm left with x minus 4 equals, and then the next step was to add 4. Okay, so now I'm here, and now I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and now I get x is equal to -12. Okay, so when you do the inverse, you're creating the steps to solve. So how do I undo adding 5? Subtracting 5. And how do I undo multiplying by 2? I undo multiplication by division. Subtract becomes addition. Divide becomes multiply. Divide becomes multiply. Subtraction becomes addition. Let's do the inverse. Instead of adding 15, my first step is to subtract 15. Divide becomes multiply. Multiply becomes divide. Subtract becomes add. Remember, we are undoing these. These are the inverses. So the inverse of adding 6 is subtracting 6. Instead of multiplying by 2, we're going to divide by 2. Divide by 3, multiply by 3. Subtract becomes add. Multiply becomes divide. So again, divide becomes multiply. Notice that the numbers stay the same. How do I undo adding? That's subtracting. How do I undo multiplying? How do I undo subtracting? That's adding. And then here, how do I undo adding 4? I subtract 4. How do I undo multiplying? I divide. How do I undo adding? I subtract. And how do I undo division? I use multiplication.